Hey guys, it's now time to introduce another chord type, and we're talking about dominant seventh chords now. Okay, now the dominant seventh chords are another type of really common chords in all genres and also in R&B and neo-soul. Okay, so let's start by saying that you make a dominant seventh chord using a major triad, so root, major third and perfect fifth, adding the minor seventh. And the function of these chords is really to create tension. We can think of any chord progression as a game of tension and resolution, and the tension is usually coming from a dominant seventh chord. Okay, so let's have a look at a few chord positions. Okay, one chord position will be with the root on the A string. Okay, for instance, we can learn this E7 dominant. Okay, now the E dominant 7 chord is made by the notes E, G sharp, B and D. Okay, but when you play this chord position here with the root on the 7th fret and then second finger, little finger and first, you don't have the note B. So we are already into what we call an omit 5 position. Okay, now don't get scared, you know, omit 5 positions are actually pretty common. Okay, and in fact this chord is coming from the caged system, and particularly from a C7 chord, which you can play here in open position, so using open strings. Now this C7 shape, when you move the root from the note C to the note E, becomes an E7. Okay, what is really important is that when you move this chord position, because you don't have any bar, you don't want to have any open string either. So when you play the E7 like this, the first string is muted and the top string is muted as well. So what you're playing really is just the 5th, 4th, 3rd and 2nd strings. Okay, now when you play an E7, if you also play this string, it's actually fine because that's another E, so you're playing the root. But as always, we want a position that we can move around wherever we like. Okay, so the E7 can be played here, but with the same shape, you can play a D7, okay, or any other dominant 7 chord you need. Now, this is not the only position that we'll look at with the root note on the A string. So instead of using a C shape like a C7, we can also use an A7 shape, so coming from the A family of the caged system. So if we look at the E note on the 7th fret of the A string, if we bar it this time like this, we can use another couple of fingers to actually play an A7 shape, and this will be an E7 chord in A shape. So both this position and this are E7, but this is a C shape of the caged. This is an A shape of the caged. The root is the same here, okay, on the A string. Now, personally, I don't like this one very much. We might find it from time to time. It's sometimes useful to get a sus chord and things like that, but I don't find it very nice in terms of voicing. Okay, so it's more likely that when we have to play dominant 7 chords with the root on the A, I will actually be using this kind of C shape. Okay, but what if we want to learn a dominant 7 chord which actually has the root on the E string? Okay, so we will have to refer to the E shape of the caged. Well, for example, we can play an A7, and one A7 position that I'm sure most of you already know is this. Okay, this is a bar, okay, followed by an E7 shape, so that means now I'm looking at how you play an E7 in open strings, you know, using open strings, I mean, in open position like that. And then what you do is barring the 5th fret, because we know that here we've got the A, we bar this position, and then with the other 2 fingers, I'm basically playing an E7 shape. And I get this, okay. This is one way of playing the A7 with the root on fret 5 of the E string, okay. And it's definitely a bar position, bar chord position coming from the E shape. Now, another position that we can play very similar to this really is something similar to what we did with the -7 chords. So this time I'm not using any shape of the caged system, or at least not strictly. And what I'm looking at is this position here, where there is no bar and only 4 strings are actually played, okay? There is no A string and no E string, so the 5th and the 1st are actually muted. Then all I'm doing is playing the root here with the 1st finger, skipping 1 string like we said, 2nd finger goes on the same fret, just 2 strings below on the D string, then the ring finger goes another 2 strings below, okay, on the same fret, and my little finger will play the major third of the chord on fret 6 this time of the G string, like this. Okay, when you play this again, because those 2 strings are muted and you have no open strings, then you can move it around wherever you like it, as if it was a bar chord. Okay, so literally like you do with this position. Okay, so what's the difference really between playing a chord like this and a chord like this? Well, obviously this kind of position is actually included here. The difference is when you play this, you only play those 4 notes that make a dominant 7 chord: root, 3rd, 5th, and 7th. So you don't really repeat any of these notes twice in the chord, like you do, for instance, here. Okay, just think about this, which is an A, and this is another A. So you don't play this note twice when you play something like this. Okay, this applies to other chord types like minor 7th and also major 7 chords, but we'll see that later. Now let's recap the dominant 7 chord positions that we looked at. Root on the A string, the example was an E7 chord, and this was the root. C shape would get you to this E7 chord position. A shape would get you to this E7 chord position. When we look at a dominant 7 chord with the root on the E string, the example is an A7 chord. Well, we can play either a bar chord in E shape like this, okay? Or you can play this other position which doesn't repeat any of the notes of the chord twice.